At what point do you make your earnest money deposit? What are disclosures and when do you get those? And finally, what are contingencies and when do you remove them? Watch this video to find out. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Christian Medina. I'm a realtor with Realty Masters and Associates here in Southern California out of the Inland Empire. If you are new to this channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button as I put up new videos every Wednesday of all things real estate here in Southern California. In today's video, we're going to continue with the three-part series of the 3 phases of the home buying process. All right, well, let's start with step 1 of phase 2, which is the buyer's deposit. Well, the buyer will have 3 days to make a deposit after their acceptance. A buyer's deposit is putting your money where your mouth is. Once you've gone through the trouble of making an offer, you want to show the seller that you're really committed to buying the property. Traditionally, you do this by putting a cash deposit, called an earnest deposit or a good faith deposit. If all goes well, that money could either be given back to you at the close of escrow, or more commonly, it's applied to your down payment or your closing costs. The buyer's deposit is typically as low as 1%. The higher the deposit is, the more serious the seller will see that you are about purchasing their home. All right, part 2 of phase 2 is the disclosures. Seller must deliver to the buyers all disclosures within 7 days after the acceptance. The disclosures are made using the standard form upon which the seller will check off features of the property and describe their condition. Now, what you read may affect your decision in staying with escrow or withdrawing out of escrow. Disclosure forms are a few pages long and they describe features such as appliances, the roof, foundation, and other structural components. They go through electrical, water, sewer, heating, and other mechanical systems, trees and environmental hazards like lead, asbestos, mold, or contamination by use of a meth lab, and finally zoning. Some disclosure forms also cover legal issues, such as ownership problems, legal disputes concerning the property, or community association fees. The seller will also have to disclose if there has been a death in the home within the last 3 years, and describe how the death happened. Was it a murder, suicide, or natural causes? Also, if you know of any nearby criminal activity or other factors such as excessive neighborhood noise. These are all things that can affect the buyer's decision in order to move forward with the purchase. All right, step 3 is the contingency removals. Now, there are 2 very important ones. First is your inspection contingency removal. When you look at your residential purchase agreement and take a look at line 14B, by default, you're gonna have 17 days to review all your disclosures and do all your inspections on the property. Now, those days can be adjusted. They can be shortened or lengthened. It's whatever you and the seller agree to before you get into escrow. This step is important. You reviewed all the disclosures, you've done all your inspections for the property, and you're satisfied with all your findings. If this is true, then you would go on and remove your inspection contingency. And what you're doing by removing the contingency is just telling all parties that you're checking off this as being done and moving over to the next step. While you might be securing a loan and getting inspections done, the seller may be working on performing repairs and finding a new place to live. Each of you will need to advise each other on the progress you're making, and with the help of your realtor, provide written releases when a contingency is removed. If either of you fails to remove the contingency, you can either call off the purchase or renegotiate. Step 4 of phase 2 is removing your loan contingency. The standard California real estate agreement gives the buyer 21 days by default to release their loan contingency. That time frame also can be shortened or lengthened on the purchase agreement, and it will be something that the seller and the buyer agree to before going into escrow. At the end of that time frame, if a buyer has not signed a release of contingencies, the seller can cancel the contract. After delivering to the buyer a request for a buyer to perform, and therefore giving the buyer 48 to 72 hours, typically, to perform. Now, after the buyer has released all the contingencies in the contract, the buyer is obligated to move forward with the contract. If the buyer decides to cancel the contract after signing a release of contingencies, and this is where the contingencies is really important, the seller has the right to demand the buyer's earnest money deposit and may be entitled to liquidated damages. So make sure that before you're removing these contingencies first, you've spoken to your agent, and second, that you have spoken with your lender about the loan approval. You must get that loan approval first before you can move those contingencies. Alright guys, well that's it for part 2 of the 3 video series. Make sure you tune in next week for part 3. There, I'll be discussing loan doc signing, the final verification of the property, your estimated close of escrow, and finally, getting your keys to your dream home. If you have any other questions regarding anything I've discussed so far, make sure to leave a comment below. Again, if you're new, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. If you liked the video, please hit like. And as usual, I'll see you guys next week.